All right, so we're going to try to clarify the difference between two equal signs and dot equals, especially when we're talking about strings. All right, so I'm going to create a class called string equals, and we want that thing to be in math and logic, and I want it to have a main method. So let's just talk a little bit quickly about how variables work in computer programs. Okay, so if we create an int called x and set it equal to 10, what we want to do is we want to think about computer memory, or RAM. Okay, so when we talked about how computers work, we said that they have RAM so that the processor can remember the things that it's working with. So when we do something like this, over here, these are supposed to be like addresses in RAM. So we'll just pick some random address, number 13 here. And what that line of code does is puts a 10 there. And then the computer keeps track of the fact that we're going to call that thing x, but it doesn't think about it like x. It thinks about it like x is just the number 13. Kind of similar to like when you guys go to school, right? You say like, I'm going to school. You don't say, I'm going to 1801 West Olive Street, right? You give that address a name, right? Or I'm going home, or I'm going to Bob's house, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You give that location a name. And that's what we're doing when we have x here. We're giving the location a name so that we can use it later on. That make sense so far? Okay, so let's get some notes in here. So basically what we want to do is say there are two ways of creating string objects. Okay, number one is using a string literal. All right, and that's like just having text. Okay, so for an example down here, let's go string t equals Rufus King. Okay, that's using a string literal. Number two is using new string with the text inside of there. And so what we're doing there is using the constructor, okay, from the string class. And so an example of that would be like string x equals new string, and then inside of here, putting in the Rufus King. Okay? So what we want to do is talk about how these, oh, I already have something called x, so let's get rid of this. Let's just give it a different name. We'll call it w. Okay, so these two things are done differently over in RAM, okay? T, because we're just creating this using a string literal, it does what's called adding that string literal to what is called the string heap, okay? So there's a special part of RAM that's called the string heap, and basically what this is going to do is say, now Rufus King is in there, and that's going to be called T by the person using the program. When we use the word new, we get a new space in memory. So this is also putting in Rufus King somewhere and giving it the word W, but it's not adding it to the heap. It's giving it its own location because we're using the word new. So it's like, give me a new spot in memory. Okay? If I go like this and I say string U equals Rufus King, okay? This would go into the heap because I'm not using the word new, and because Rufus King is already in the heap, it just says, oh, U also points at this thing. So I'm going to merge those so we can see that T and U are both referring to Rufus King that's in the heap. You guys following that so far? Okay, so when we use number one, the string literal, the string gets added to the heap. When we use number two, the string gets a new space in memory. Or RAM. Okay? So why do we care about that? Well, what we want to do is kind of talk about when we should use two equal signs and when we should use dot equals. All right? So if we do this, we're going to take a look at this and say print out whether t equals w. Okay? So I'm just going to run this. Okay? So this says false. T does not equal W. So even though T is Rufus King and W is Rufus King, they're not equal to each other. Okay? Does T dot equal W? Let's print that out. That is true. Okay? So this one is false. This one is true. All right? And so what we're showing you here is that equal is only true when the two objects refer to the same space in memory. All right? And dot equals is only true when two objects have the same value. All right? So dot equals returns true because Rufus King matches Rufus King, right? The thing that W points at is Rufus King. The thing that T points at is Rufus King. T equal W is false because T points to something that's in the heap. W points to something that's in a different position in memory. Okay? If we do like system.out.println and we check if T equals U, and I run that, that also is true because T and U point to the same thing that's in the heap. All right? What's going on here? So that's true. Okay, so let's just do one more little example here. Let's go string y equals t. Okay. And then let's change t. Okay, so let's go t now equals home. Okay, so this line of code right here says y is another variable and it equals whatever t equals. So basically what that's doing is adding another variable here called y and saying now all three of these things refer to Rufus King. This line of code is saying we're going to create a new string literal called home, or it has the value home, and now t does not point at Rufus King anymore or refer to Rufus King anymore. Now t refers to home. Okay? And so let's go and just check some things out here. So let's print whether, let's see what I call that thing, y equals t. So what do you guys think? Is this going to be true or false? Does y equal t? So you can look down here. Does y equal t? Let's figure it out here. So this is the 3 that we have up here. Y equal t is false because t refers to home and y refers to Rufus King. They don't refer to the same thing down here. All right. What about does y equal u? And what about does y dot equal w? And what about does y dot equal t? Okay, so I'm going to comment this out. I know I'm kind of throwing a lot of examples here in a short amount of time, but let's just look at this. We already said that this is false, right? Y and t do not refer to the same thing over here, okay? Y and u, that's true, okay? Those things refer to the same thing down here. Does y equal w like that? Well, y refers to something that has the value Rufus King. W refers to something that has the value Rufus King. They're the exact same characters, so that should be true. Does y equals t? Y is Rufus King, t is home. So no, that's false. Okay? And so that's the way that we want to think about when we should use equal equals and when we should use dot equals. So dot equals, like we said up here, tells us that they have the same value. Two equal signs tells us that they're in the same space in memory. Okay? If two objects are equal like this, they have to be equal like this. Okay? But just because this is false doesn't mean that this is not true.